it. So welcome, welcome. We're going to go ahead and get started, and others will continue to file in. Welcome, awesome NYC. I love it. I love seeing where you're all listening from. So I would love to introduce myself. My name is Sierra Bragan, and I'm the owner and founder of Miami Mom Collective, and we are Miami's premier parenting resource. Our heart and our mission is to encourage, equip, and empower local moms and families. And we do that through providing resources on all of our platforms. We're on all the social media platforms, as well as a website, miamimomcollective.com. And we host events for moms and for families. So one of the things that we love to do, again, is to put meaningful, helpful resources right into your hands, or right into your computer. So we're thrilled to partner with UHealth Jackson Children's Care for this webinar. Again, so many that you can go back and watch, jacksonevents.org. I'll remind you again at the end, but jot that down. I do want to tell you a couple things about Jackson that if you are not aware of, I just want to make a little note of that. I always say, I hope you never need an emergency room, but if you do, the pediatric emergency rooms at Holtz Children's Hospital, as well as Jackson North and Jackson West, are available to you 24/7. They're all staffed with board certified pediatric emergency medicine specialists. And so your parents and the children are getting the best access from all the subspecialists at Holtz Children's Hospital, as well as the University of Miami Health System and the Jackson Health System. So you really are going to have every resource right there at your fingertips. And additionally, tonight, we're talking about behavior. So I want to make note that Jackson's Behavioral Health Hospital, they actually provide outpatient services to children as young as age 4, all the way up through adolescence, age 21. So maybe children, adolescents that are experiencing challenges in their lives, everything from major life stressors, difficulty functioning at home or at school, on into more significant behavioral or emotional concerns. So just wanted to let you know about that. Jackson's Behavioral Health Hospital is there for you, and there are also in-person and telehealth appointments available. So thank you again to Jackson for hosting us tonight, and we have got to dive right in because I just know there's going to be I have so many questions. I've been thinking about it all afternoon. So I'm thrilled to introduce you to tonight's expert, Dr. Clara Laura Ospina. She is the director of the Psychology Internship Training Program, as well as the clinical director of the Adult Outpatient Center for Behavioral Medicine at Jackson Behavioral Health Hospital. Welcome. I have to share a little bit more about you because you are incredibly qualified to help us tonight with so many topics. And I want to give our guests just an overview of all that you have done and your specialty. So her areas of interest are specifically PTSD and other anxiety-related disorders, depression, marital discord, bereavement, adjustment due to loss or issues pertaining to infertility or chronic pain management, end-of-life issues, as well as situational stressors. I kind of feel like that means everything. I feel like you can help us with all the things that might cause stress for us. Dr. Ospina was also a clinical supervisor at Boston University's Center for Anxiety and Related Disorders, as well as the Psychological Services Center and the adjunct professor at Emmanuel College in Boston, Massachusetts. Can I say go Red Sox? I don't know. Hopefully either that resonates with you or it doesn't, but I have to say it. She also has interest in facilitating groups in relaxation skills, anger management, pain management, and mindfulness. So I know she's got great information to share with us tonight. Dr. Ospina, welcome. You have been with us before, so welcome back.
Yes, it's so good to be back. And I have to say, I think the one thing that's not on there is that I'm also a mom. So that helps.
Yes, the most important criteria that brings you here today. I love it. Well, I love seeing the comments. I'm looking and seeing someone said dad is in the room too. And I love that. I love that we got dads here too. That's great. This information is super helpful, as we gain wisdom. But if you are, in a marriage or in a partnership, having those skills together, those tools in your toolbox is only going to strengthen things overall. So without further ado, let's jump right in. Again, if you're just joining us, utilize the Q&A feature at the bottom of your screen. If you have a question, I will do my very best to try to get all of those right here in front of Dr. Ospina, but we're going to lightning round. We're going to get you lots of questions. So let's get started with, are my expectations of how my child, I'll say my child, but our children behave appropriate? Like, are our expectations appropriate? And how do we know what is normal behavior that we might perceive as bad behavior? How do we know we're having right expectations?
Yeah. So actually, before I answer that question, I do want to say that you mentioned dads. If dads are home, I encourage people, moms, partners, bring your partner into this conversation today, because one of the things about expectations, and this kind of leads into not only expectations, but all the other things we're going to be talking about tonight, is that we need to be on the same page, right? Parenting is not parenting is a team sport, basically. It's not a one parent sport. Both parents need to be present and on the same page about parenting styles, and to your question about expectations, right? Because if we're not on the same page about these things, then we are going to be giving off confusing messages to our children. That's going to confuse our children, and it's not going to help with parenting.
That's good. And sometimes we can assume that we are on the same page, but if you've never actually talked about it, you might actually not be on the same page. So that's good. Communication.
We don't want to assume, and a lot of our parenting, a lot of how we parent comes from how we were parented. We take we hope that we take the good and the best and all that stuff, but it's very likely that partners in parenting were parented differently. So they might have different expectations. So it really is so important. I can't say that enough, so I'll probably say it a couple of times.
Love it.
A couple of the few things that I'll talk about, I'm probably going to say them a few times. So how do we set expectations about what is appropriate, right? What are my expectations appropriate for my child? Discipline is really all about knowing about child development. So there's one point that I really want to drive home, is that in order for you to discipline appropriately, it is important to know what is appropriate for a child your age, the age of your child, right? Because disciplining a 3-year-old is different from disciplining a 9-year-old, and it's different from disciplining a 15-year-old. And so we need to, ahead of time, do some reading and inform ourselves about just the basics of child development in the basic stages. So you want to know about toddler child development, like what is appropriate for a toddler, what's appropriate for a preschooler, what's appropriate for a middle schooler tween, what is appropriate for a teen, and then beyond. So the best thing I can do is get yourselves a simple child development book and do some reading.
That is good. That's a good advice. I'm a child. I have child development as my background in school, and I catch myself. I have a 4-year-old and a 2-year-old, and I expect the same from the 2-year-old that I expect of the 4-year-old, because I'm like, they're close. He's big. They're the same size, and it's not. You can't do that. And I even think about giving instructions, and kind of one of the rules is however their age is like you don't want to give them more than that many steps. And I'll catch myself telling the 2-year-old, go upstairs in your room, get your shoes, get your socks, come back down, put them on, meet me at the door, and I'm like, that's way too much. So I love that you said that and that you started with that. And it doesn't take a background to, like you said, learn those things. Get a simple book. I bet a Google search could pull up, a list of age appropriate activities, and I think, or the milestones. And I think that would be a great thing to maybe keep on the fridge just to remind you that they're still learning. So I love that you started there. This is a big one, and this is one I think, if we're all honest, that we all struggle with. But why is it so important for discipline to be consistent?
Yeah, there's 3 pillars to discipline, and consistency is one of them. The other one is patience, and the other one is realism, right? Be realistic. And the reason it's important to be consistent is because consistency breeds consistency. Our consistency, right, teaches children to expect consistency and to be consistent. Discipline helps children feel safe. In fact, it keeps children safe. And discipline helps build self-esteem and self-efficacy. Self-esteem being kind of how we feel about ourselves, and self-efficacy being how we feel about our capacity to do things for ourselves. And discipline is really one of the cornerstones of all of these fundamental, qualities of a strong, healthy child with a good, healthy self-esteem. So
Mhm.
it's so
That's good.
important. I mean, it really is, like I said, one of the three main pillars of discipline.
That's so good. And just such a reminder that we all come from very different backgrounds, and maybe some of us come from, a great parenting style that we want to continue and learn from, and maybe further develop. Maybe some of us come from challenging, you
Yeah.
know, parenting issues or discipline strategies. And I think sometimes it's easy to. I have to remind myself, like sometimes you think, man, boundaries and fences. As a teenager, you thought, oh, this is so restrictive, but what you said for protection, it's like, no, we fence them in some ways to allow them the freedom to run free within those boundaries. So I love that you said that too. And from parent to parent, I know you're a parent, and many who are watching tonight, it's hard. I think we can all join in on that, like, man, it's hard to be consistent, especially when at the end of the day and you feel
Oh
like,
yeah.
again, you're doing the same thing again.
Oh yeah.
But when we remember what you said of how it will reap those rewards, and just I love in the terms of the self-efficacy and the self-esteem for our children, because sometimes I think I need to be consistent because I want to train this behavior so that I don't be annoyed by it anymore, but no, it's for their good. And so I think that's a
Yeah.
good, for me, just hearing you say that now, a good reframer and motivation when I'm tired to stay consistent.
Yeah. The fact of the
I
matter
love
is
that.
that discipline and how we discipline is as much about us as it is about our kids.
Mm,
In fact, to your point, oftentimes it's actually more about us,
mm,
because it's our expectations that we're putting on kids. It's our way of showing them, who's in control, or it's our way of teaching them, or it's our way of keeping them safe. And so, how we discipline and how discipline affects us,
yeah,
it says so much about us. It says more about us than it does about our kids. Really, they don't know, right?
that's
And
right.
so, and that's why when we become frustrated, or when it is difficult, we're tired and it's difficult to remain consistent, it's
Mhm.
important to allow for us to have those moments, to not
Mhm.
have that expectation that we have to be perfect, right? I mean, of course we want to be consistent, but I get it.
Yeah.
I mean, I get it. There's times where you're just going to say, okay, fine, have the chocolate, have the cookie, watch the iPad for another 30 minutes, because maybe I need that, because maybe I need that time for
Right.
myself. So while we do
Right.
want to be consistent, we also want to allow for flexibility, and we want to allow for children to be able to explore this world with some freedom as well. We don't want to
Yeah.
fence them in so much so that when we're gone, right, in the absence of parents and in the absence
Right.
of that structure, the kids don't know what to do.
That's right. That's good. So good. A question that we received from the audience member is, you spoke about, understanding the correct milestones for different age groups. And this person is asking, what about for a child who may have ADHD? Like, how do you kind of know what would be developmentally appropriate? I know obviously it would relate to the age as well, but what would you
Right.
say to
Yeah,
that?
most of it relates to the age. I mean, the ADHD is more about how you're still going to discipline to the appropriate milestone, age milestone. You're just going to break up your discipline into smaller bites of discipline, if you will.
Okay.
And so one of the
Mhm.
things that you said, the you're not going to, if you tell a 2-year old, okay, you're going to go upstairs, you're going to change your shoes, you're going to change your socks, you're going to brush your teeth, you're going to bring your doll, and then you're going to come downstairs, that's too much. And it's probably too much. It's
Right.
probably not too much, for an 8-year old or a 9-year old. But with an 8-year old or a 9-year old with ADHD, you are going to have to break that down. And so you're going to have to say, okay, do these three things and then come back to me. And then maybe do these three things again and come back to me. And then do these other
Mhm.
three things and come back to me. So you are still giving kind of the
Mhm.
9 commands, if you will, but you're just breaking them up into smaller, more to the child's capacity of
Digestible.
absorbing.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Or else you're just going to
Right.
frustrate. You're going to frustrate the child, and you're going
Yeah.
to frustrate yourself.
That's good. Yeah. Oh, we've all been there, right? That frustration piece for sure. Okay, a couple other questions that are related a little bit to what you spoke about at the beginning, talking about expectations, and communicating that. A couple of different questions. One pertains to like maybe a husband and wife who have different upbringings. So
Yeah.
one has, maybe a stricter upbringing. Another one was like never punished for anything. How do they kind of come together on creating something that works together?
One of the most important things is that whoever the parent that is in charge at the time, is allowed to be in charge at the time, and that the other parent needs to be supportive of whatever that parent is doing. Unless it comes to, there is, the asterisk, there would be maybe corporal punishment or something like that. If you're really, that's a huge no-no for you, then yes, definitely jump in and intervene. But anything really aside from that, you allow the forward facing parent, the one who is disciplining in the moment, you allow that parent to do their thing. And if this parent, the observer, if they disagree with what's going on, they're still going to support that parent in the moment, so that you are showing a united front. Because it's very, very important for kids to see that mom and dad agree on this, because kids are, we all know this, kids are super intelligent, they're very
Yeah.
astute, they notice everything, the verbals, the nonverbals, everything. And they are going to
Yeah.
know if mom and dad aren't on the same page. You see, there's a space between mom and dad. They're going to find that space, and they're going to
Mhm.
try to widen it. They're
Right.
going to try to split. Yes. They're
That's
going to
good.
try to split the parents. So in that
Yeah.
moment, both parents are on the same page. And then when the moment is over and the child is out of the room, that's the time to discuss. That's the time to say, you know what, honey, it really was very off-putting when you yelled. I didn't grow up yelling, and so how can we work? How can I help you in those moments? Maybe I can say something to you. Maybe I can say, hey, would you like me to help you in the moment? You tell me when you guys are and when the child is not around. When that child is around, there's got to be a united front. It's really, really
Oh, I think we're having. Oh, can you hear me? Are we having a little technical difficulty?
I'm here. I can hear you.
Oh, okay, good. Sorry, it kind of froze on my end, so I was like, oh no. So did you get to finish the thought on that? I apologize.
Yeah,
It froze on my end. Okay.
I did.
Awesome. Along those lines, I think that is great. And that whole wedge thing. Ooh, kids know. They know how to
Oh
do
yeah.
that.
Oh
We were
yeah.
all kids once. We did it too. But let's talk about grandparents. And we were talking about consistency. How do we include the extended family so we all stay on the same page? And then I want you to talk about blended families. If they're in trouble at mom's, do they continue the punishment when they go to dad's, or how does that work?
Yeah, it is important to communicate. I mean, grandparents, visitors to your home, extended family, things like that can be a problem. I often I'm constantly dealing with the question, not the question, but I'm constantly dealing with, I asked my mom not to give them too many cookies or too much sugar or too much candy, or to put them to bed at a certain time. And grandparents are like, oh, whatever, it's my turn to have fun, and I'm just a fun one, and I'll just drop them off, and they'll be all, loaded up on candy, and I don't really care. Well, that's not okay.
Right.
That's not okay. And grandparents and everyone else, anyone who's going to be, with your children, around your children, especially in your home, really needs to be aware of what the house rules are. And they really do need to respect the house rules. And so if there's an adult that's having a difficult time respecting your house rules for discipline of your children, mind you, this is a discipline of your children. It's
Right.
a little here when we're talking about disciplining someone else's children in your home. But let's
Okay.
stick with disciplining our children in our home. If there's an adult there who's having a hard time or who is challenging you, again, you don't want to do that in front of the children. You
Mm-hmm.
want to bring that adult aside, and you want to explain to them, oh, the rule here is that kids go to bed at 8, and so Susie's gonna have to go to bed at 8, whether I'm here or not. So
Yeah.
please
Honor that. Yeah.
cooperate with that. Exactly, honor it and cooperate it. And so you try to get them to buy in. If you think that this person's not going to buy in, and you've given them a fair amount of tries,
Mm-hmm.
this may sound bad, but the solution there is don't have that person
Right.
over as much, right? Or try to
Mm-hmm.
have them over in limited amounts of time.
Right.
Or explain ahead of time to your child, right? Grandma's coming over. Grandma doesn't really like the rules in the house. Grandma doesn't really respect the rules in the house, but we respect the rules in the house, right? So then you're colluding with your child, basically, and kind of bringing them in, right?
Right.
So that they will understand when the rules are happening, why they're important and why we're going to stick with them, regardless of who's there.
That's good. That's good. Would you say anything more specific to a blended family where maybe a child's going back and forth to mom or dad, but there's different rules and scenarios at two
Yeah,
different
I mean,
places?
that one's really tough. It's important for there to be communication, and we want to try for those rules to be as close as possible, especially the fundamental rules,
Right.
things like maybe different bedtimes. There's some flexibility there, food and things, what they eat, there's some flexibility there, but you guys have to decide what are the things that there isn't flexibility, right? Maybe
Right.
using bad language or hitting or some of these very, very strict ones where you and your co-parent need to really agree on these fundamental things. And again, it's up to us adults to negotiate that and be able to come to an agreement.
Right, right. Oh, that's good and helpful. Thank you. And yeah, I saw a comment saying, I'm going to be sure to send this to the grandparents. So if you need an easy into the discussion, just forward them this webinar and say, hey, well, give this a watch and let's chat about
Laura said so.
it. That's right. I love it. Okay, on the same lines, what about daycare? Because, that's like another space where someone else is the authority. How do you balance the behavior if your child is going to daycare?
Yeah, oftentimes what we find is that kids will tend to behave better at daycare, for example, and that they save some of their, not so great behavior, or their pushing of the boundaries is probably a little bit higher at
Mhm.
home. And not only that, it's probably a little bit even higher with whoever the primary parent is.
Mhm.
And so there are different levels of pushing boundaries. And so what we will find sometimes is that you go pick up your child and they're like, oh, Susie was amazing, she was wonderful, and then Susie comes home and she starts hitting, throwing, scratching, kicking, biting. We
Yep.
have no idea why. Some of it is because they're trying out behaviors that they've seen other children do,
Mm.
that maybe they haven't done themselves, and they're trying out to see, how is this going to work with mom, right? If I do
Yeah.
this, how is this going to work? What is her reaction going to be? So there's a lot of testing of limits that happens. And then it happens in the reverse as well. So maybe the child is really good at home because they know you mean business, or because you
Mhm.
started early. And I can't stress this enough: start discipline early. And that's not
Mm.
to say you're a sergeant or a drill sergeant, but you want
Right.
to start setting limits and teaching children about limits and boundaries and about discipline. You want to start that early. By the time they do head to school, they're going to have some knowledge of that. Maybe at
Mhm.
school, the numbers are different, right? There isn't 1-to-1. It's like 5-to-1 or 10-to-1. And so the child is allowed to explore in a way that they're not allowed to explore maybe at home. And again, they start testing boundaries
Right.
and pushing boundaries. So at that point, it's important to have, again, good communication with the teacher, and to let the teacher know, look, these are the rules at home. This is what happens at home. And if the behavior is really different, it's important for that person, for that teacher to know, right? My child is behaving really
That's right.
differently in daycare than they are at home. How can I help? How can I help
Mhm.
you with that?
Yeah, that communication is so key again. Those expectations and clear communication is super helpful because yeah, I laugh because sometimes my 2 year old's my kind of, my wild one right now. I don't call him wild, but and I'll pick him up from school some days. They're like, he's so chill. And I think, is it the same child at school that it
Exactly.
is at home? But also
Exactly.
that, in some ways it says he feels safe to, like you said, test some new behaviors, but you got to nip them in the bud too. So that's good.
Absolutely.
Talk to us. Could we unknowingly be reinforcing bad behavior in our child?
Definitely, definitely. So one of the ways that we reinforce bad behavior is by having the rule of do as I say and not as I do. Because the fact of the matter is that we have to role model the behavior that we are asking our children that we're asking from our children, especially when it comes to discipline. So if we are asking them to do something, then we've got to model that ourselves. So one of the things that happens is that parents, just kind of they set the rule, but they don't follow the rule. So if there's a rule at home, everybody follows the rule, right?
Mm-hmm.
Not just the child. So modeling the behavior is one way in which, not modeling the behavior is one way in which we reinforce bad behavior. The other way is by giving attention to the behavior. And I think we all know this, but sometimes we need to be reminded that not all attention is good attention, right? In fact, we do want to catch our kids being good, catch them being good. You want to really praise positive behavior and give attention when there's something positive to be attentive to. One of the most difficult things to do oftentimes, and I know this as a parent, is to ignore bad behavior, but that is actually a really good way of reinforcing bad behavior, of not reinforcing bad behavior, is to ignore it, because attention is a reinforcer. Good attention,
Yeah.
bad attention, it's all a reinforcer. And so
Saying like, this is not the way to get my attention. So
absolutely
not giving,
just ignore it. And just one thing that you need to know when you're doing this ignoring thing is that when you ignore a behavior, the children do something called, children basically up the ante. So you ignore, they yell a little bit more. You ignore, they yell a little bit more, because they're like, hey, what's it gonna take to get this lady to turn around and look at me? And there's going to come a point where you're going to be thinking, oh God, I can't do this anymore. But you have to hold it. You have to hold the line. You have to be strong and hold the line, because there comes a point where they realize that you're not going to turn around. You're not basically going to give them the attention. And that's called the extinction burst. And that point is when the behavior stops. That's when the kid says, okay, really, this is not worth my time. This is not worth my effort. And the behavior does go away. But we have to make it past that extinction burst.
Okay. And then giving them good attention in the ways that are appropriate to gain mommy's or daddy's attention. You know, it's like, oh, that was so much easier for them than putting on the show. There's so much here. Oh, Dr. Ospina, if you are just joining us, listeners, welcome. Dr. Ospina is diving deep with us into discipline. If you have questions, you can drop them in the Q&A box and we'll try to get to all of them. But here comes some more. Talk to us. You said, I've heard the phrase, praise what you want to raise, so keep that positive reinforcement coming. What are the best ways to motivate good behavior?
Okay, well, that's not a one size fits all. That's different because kids are different, but there are some, kind of key things that we can do. So definitely praise is one of them. There are children that we want to model the behavior. So we want to model the behavior. We want to praise the good behavior when it happens. We want to be clear about what the expectations and the rules are. Sometimes we just assume, because I was this kind of child, that my child should be this kind of child, or that my child should know that, pulling the dog's ears is not a good thing. Maybe they don't. And if they don't, then we need to tell them that this is not a good thing. And we need to then go and provide kind of a physical guidance, especially with small children, providing physical guidance where you take their hand and you put your hand on top of theirs and you say, here, do it like this. For example, when you're teaching them to be gentle, or you're teaching with the voice, you say, here, talk like this when we're at church, kind of thing. So you want to kind of teach in a very in the moment physical way. And again, that goes along with the modeling. Token economies work, sticker charts, so any kind of structured incentive, and that can be age appropriate. So it can be stickers for a very young child. It can be little tokens that lead to something else for a child that's a little bit older, and it can be money for teenagers, tweens. I know some parents bristle at the idea of token economies or of rewarding behavior, but the fact of the matter is, if your child is one of the children that responds to that type of behavior or that type of reinforcement or incentive, then you've got to go with that. And there is nothing wrong with doing that. There is nothing wrong with doing that. I often tell parents, would you go to work if you weren't getting paid? Most of us would not, right? I
Yeah.
mean, even if we like what we're doing,
Right.
we work on incentives, and
Yeah.
so do children. And so it is
That's right.
perfectly okay to
Yeah.
incentivize children.
That's good. That's good. Oh, so many good things here. What is a transition and how do we use it in discipline?
Yeah, so transitions they have become like very important, and our attention to transitions have become important, which is actually really, really wonderful. A transition is when you are changing, kind of like changing stations, if you will. So now we're having dinner, or now some of the more difficult transitions are from playtime to structured time. Um,
Right.
and so what we want to do is we want to help the child by giving them a heads up, basically by announcing that we are about to change to a different behavior. Our focus is about to change, or we're physically about to change to a different behavior. So these become problematic when we are, let's say, leaving grandma's house if they love being at grandma's house, or about to leave the park if they love being at the park. Or like I said,
Mhm.
we are done with dinner, or we are about to go to dinner, or we're about to go to bedtime. So you want to announce to the child, and again, you want to be age appropriate. So with a very small child, with a toddler, you don't want to say you have 2 minutes left, because they have no idea what 2 minutes is. 2 minutes means nothing. So you say, right, I have no idea. And so you'll say, you can play with this toy and this toy. And then after you're done with those toys, then we're going to put the toys away. And after we put the toys away, we're going to go brush our teeth. So you kind of want to announce ahead what are the things that are going to be coming. And you want to
That's
give the child enough time. I have a 9-year-old son, for example, and he plays video games, and it is, his, mortal time is whenever I pop in and say, hey, we got to go now. Because he's like, I'm in the middle of Roblox and I'm playing with so and so. That's terrible. So I've learned, right? I've learned that I have to say, Lucas, we're going to be leaving in 5 minutes, set a timer. And nowadays we have these wonderful things. We have an Alexa. We have to use the tools that we have, or he has a watch, or his computer or his game will have a little timer, and they can set a timer and it'll tell them. So it has to be age appropriate in terms of helping transitions.
That's good. Oh, that's so helpful. We have been struggling, our family personally, just getting everyone to the car. That's like the hardest transition for us. It just always turns chaotic. So we've
Yeah.
implemented a sticker chart. And if you go straight to your chair and buckle, you get a sticker. So we're trying that to see. So
And one of the things, if I may jump in, Sierra, is that you have more than one child. The kids may work differently in terms of how they adjust to transitions. And so if you know that you have one child that has more difficulty with transitions than others, then you've got to
Mhm,
get that child more time, and
mhm,
maybe a little bit more structure to transition,
mhm.
and a little bit more help in that transition. It could be standing next to them. It could be, can I help you with anything? Is there anything that I need to help you with? Like putting
That's
things by the door, things like that. So we want to do as much as we can to help kids. And again, if you're in a family where there's more than one child, not all these things are going to work the same for all your kids. And so we really do have to kind of adjust to the personality of each of the kids, which makes it even more exhausting and more frustrating. So I get it's a tall order.
That's right. Oh, it's good. We all wish that we could keep Dr. Ospina in our pocket and we could be like, okay, what do I do right now? Like what in this moment, what should I do? That's what I wish I could have a little call you on. Like, what should I do right now? Talk to us about how important is it that we change our child's behavior?
Okay, so it's important some of the time, depending on the behavior. And then there are other times when it is okay for you to say, you know what, it's okay. So I'll give you an example of each. Let's say the child does not want to go to school. You have a child who is saying, I do not want to go to school. I absolutely don't want to go to school. And there's fits, and that is a behavior that we really cannot allow. We can't condone the child not going to school. So that is a
Right.
behavior that we do need to put the effort into changing, right? Trying to figure out what's going on. Why is the child not wanting to go to school? We have to really put the time into that. let's say you were a scout when you were a young girl, and you want your daughter to be in Girl Scouts, and has been a dream, and you can imagine her in her uniform, and you just are loving the idea of it, and you tell her, and she says, no way, I've seen their outfits, I don't want to do it, I don't want to sell cookies, I'm not into it, no way. It
Right.
might be a big disappointment for you,
Yeah.
but that's one of those where you
Not an
say, you know
discipline. Yeah,
what,
that's good.
it's okay. It's painful for
Yeah.
me, right? We
Right.
will go and lick our wounds, but we don't want to force that onto the child because it's not worth it. It's not necessary for them to do that.
Hmm. That's good. That's good. I think if we're honest, if we were to stop and think all the things that I disciplined for today, how many of them were really offenses, or how many of them were just my preference that
Annoyances,
wasn't met,
exactly.
you know,
Yes,
like, oh, that's challenging for
yes,
me. Yeah.
absolutely.
um that's good. Thank you, Dr. Ospina. So many questions coming in. We're going to do our best to get to all of them. Some more specific situational questions I'm going to give to you in just a minute, but a few more. I want to know, um, is it okay to discipline through physical means, such as spanking? Let's talk about it.
Yeah. So the reason that it is not great, I hate to say it's not okay, because I don't want to shame, I don't want any of our parents that are watching to feel shame, and there is a lot of shame in disciplining, because we all flip our lids sometimes, we all lose it sometimes, and most of us, I mean, I know I've been guilty of yelling and getting frustrated and maybe being mean. The thing with those types of discipline measures is that they cut at the self-esteem. And remember, when I talked about early on, self-esteem is actually built up by discipline. We want our discipline methods to help boost up the self-esteem. And so physical corporal punishment, the type of yelling where you're like cutting down, or where you're calling a child names, or where you're labeling a child, instead of labeling the behavior, those means of disciplining really affect the self-esteem. One time, no, you're not going to, your child's self-esteem is not going to crumble, but a pattern of discipline that contains those discipline measures, they chip away at the tiny self-esteem that the kids have, and they wash away any self-esteem they're trying to build. And that's why we just don't recommend that you use those methods.
Mm-hmm. Talk to us about timeout. Is it still a viable means of, discipline
Totally.
punishment?
See, that's an oldie and goodie. That's an oldie and goodie. It's totally viable.
Put
Sometimes
the
teachers
hat on them and make them stand in the corner. No, I'm just
no
no
hat,
hat
no
necessary.
hat, no, do away with the hat.
No, that's
And
shaming.
also, so there's a couple of rules with timeout that we probably have all heard of, but again, I think it's good to refresh, right? So the length of timeout equals the age of the child. So for example, if your child is 4, they can be no more than 4 minutes in timeout. If the child is 2, 2 minutes in timeout. Okay, so the age kind of if their child is 38, then they're 38 minutes in timeout.
If you're still disciplining them, then you need to have an appointment with Dr. Ospina ASAP.
um,
I'm
it's
teasing.
never ending, never ending. So that's one of the things. The other thing is you don't want to do timeout in their room. Okay, the child's room, you want that room to the room to be a soothing, safe place for them. So you do not want to do timeout in their bedroom, or put them in their crib for timeout, or anything like that. So you've got to pick a different room that is not their space, a different space for timeout. And then the expectation, again, if you have a toddler, for you to expect them to sit in a chair, for example, for 2 minutes could be a really tall order. Or to one of the questions before, maybe a child with ADD or ADHD is going to have a really difficult time, even if they are 9 years old, sitting somewhere for 9 minutes. But somehow I think we get this idea that in timeout they have to be somewhere and they have to be still. They don't. Timeout is really just about removing stimulus and giving the child a little bit of time, literally, to just reset. And that's all it is for. It's not about them being still. It's not about them being quiet. It's just about them being with themselves and having time to regroup.
That's good. And it lets you come down a little bit too. I know many times I'm like,
Absolutely.
go to timeout
I
so
was
that I
going
can
to say
like,
we need timeout. Yeah. And
yeah.
it's actually one of the things, and I might as well talk about it now. It's important to know when you need a timeout, because your child might not need a timeout, but you might need a timeout because they just did something that triggered you. We
Yeah.
get triggered when we are trying to discipline our children sometimes because their reactions, just they're triggering, right? And triggering means that they bring up something within us. That's all that triggering means. They bring something within us, and we are now having a reaction to something beyond whatever was going on between myself and the child. And so we need a little bit of time out. We need to remove ourselves, and it's important to be able to do that.
That's good. Yes. Oh, it's hard work doing the hard work on ourselves, you know, to be able to do it for our kids as well. And, you know, so often we think of, I think sometimes the word discipline gets a bad rap because people are like spanking, timeout, you
Right.
know, punishment. But it's like, think of it as, no, we're training, like we're trying to train our children in the right behavior so they can be, you know, effective, productive humans one day.
Totally.
So yeah, it's hard to remember sometimes that we're training them. And so these are, oh, your information is very good. It's helpful. It's incredibly helpful. So lots of questions. We're going to keep going. Well, you spoke a little bit to this, but obviously we should change our discipline strategies for the age. Anything else you would say to that, or tips for disciplining through different ages?
Yeah, I think again that the three pillars remain. So you want to be consistent, you want to be patient, and you want to be realistic. You want and the biggest difference in the things that we've talked about are going to be with the super young kids, and then with the tweens and teens. So at the beginning, you are going to be much more directive. And then as the kids age, you're going to be less directive. You're going to be giving more freedom. And there's going to be more discussion. There's going to be more possibility for the child to collaborate with you in their disciplining. Okay. You want to, I just totally lost my train of thought because I was thinking of teenagers. Oh, so the consequences, for example, with teenagers, the consequences really need to mean something. And here's where us being really consistent really makes a difference. And here's where I think parents struggle the most, because the teenagers are just, they're relentless. They are absolutely relentless with their boundary pushing, and with their
They
push.
are. I'm thinking the 2-year-old is the hardest.
I know.
What's coming.
I know, absolutely. And so you want to be able to, whatever your consequences are, they've got to really be something that kid values. If you say to them, if you do this again, or if this happens again, I'm gonna, take away, your I don't know, your crayons. I don't know what, I can't even think of something.
Your video game. If they don't even play the video game, then you're like, well, that's not a good.
Right, yeah. Exactly. I mean, nowadays we know what kids value, right? It's this and it's this. They're driving it, they're staring at it. Hopefully they're not doing both at the same time. The other thing is, right, you don't want to go overboard, right? Because I do struggle sometimes with helping parents kind of bring back, and they'll say, and so my child, my daughter did this, and so I grounded her for a month. And I'm thinking, okay, well, that's, first of all, it's not sustainable. So already I know that you're not going to be able to be consistent with this. So right, really 24 hours, 2 days, maybe a weekend, right? Like 3 consecutive days. That's about the maximum for any takeaway, even for a teenager. You got to think about it, because you have to be consistent. If you ground your child for a full whatever week, or a full 2 weeks, you have to be home. You have to drive them. You have to communicate, or you have to figure out how you're going to find them, or, you're going to have no time for yourself. So it's not going to work. So whatever the tokens are, whatever the consequences are, so what you give and what you take has to be important for the child. Whatever you're giving the child's got to be something that they want, And whatever you're taking away has got to be something that they value.
That's good. That's good. And that's why it's specific for every child. Our discipline is so challenging because we have to tailor it to every child. It can be very different. That's so good. I think you talked about different discipline models, but do you want to share more about that?
Yeah. There's a couple of kind of big discipline models. There's positive discipline, and I want to be clear about this. This isn't like, oh, I'm going to pick one and I'm going to use one, and this is the one I use. No, you're going to use all of these at any given time. So these are all the good tools that you want to have in your toolbox. It just depends when you take out the tool for the particular situation, and again, to reach the particular child. So there's positive discipline.
Good. Everybody get their pens for this one.
Yeah, I'll go slow. Positive discipline. Okay, and positive discipline is really based on praise and encouragement. So this is the technique that we're going to catch our kids being good. You know, your room looks so clean. This is so wonderful. You did this so well. So all of that, so the child wants to please you, and this works really, really well. This works best with younger children because they're still in that pleasing stage. That's not to say you don't want to do it with teenagers, but they're more likely to be like, ah, yeah, whatever. I don't really care what you think anyway. But so this works a little better with the younger kids. Then there's gentle discipline. Again, also works really well with the younger kids. And gentle discipline is all about kind of preventing by redirecting. And so gentle discipline is, if your child maybe has started hitting or something like that, it's okay. So you see that they're getting heated, and you're gonna, gently kind of just, hi, why don't we come over here? Why don't we play with this? So again, preventing the bad behavior from happening by just gently redirecting the child. Okay, could be verbally, could be physically. There's boundary-based discipline, which it's exactly what it sounds like. It's really setting limits and setting clear rules. And so we're all at some point going to be doing boundary-based discipline, and then there's behavior modification, and many of you may have heard this. It's what ABA is kind of based on. And behavior modification is the type of discipline that is really clearly based on positive and negative consequences. So behavior modification is all about consequences, the give and take of things. And then there's emotion coaching. This is a kind of a newer discipline model, which is about helping your child understand their emotions, understand what they're feeling when they're feeling it. And this one works really well, especially for anger, because anger is one of the emotions that causes the most discipline issues in children, actually across ages, from toddler to a teenager. And so it's really about, kind of helping them label their emotions and helping them understand that not sometimes, but that emotions and behaviors are linked. And so if sometimes we're behaving badly, it's because we're feeling badly. And so if we learn to identify those feelings that are not so comfortable or not so great, then we can maybe prevent the bad behavior,
That's good. Yeah. Can I ask a question on that? You're speaking about anger. Some of the questions that we're receiving too, I've heard there's a link with anger and anxiety. Do you see that in kids as well? Or like what kind of maybe would be that, do you see as the root of the anger?
There can be there is a link with anger and depression with children. With younger children, oftentimes they just can't, because they don't understand really what they're feeling. So sometimes depression in children looks like acting out and anger. Okay. Gotcha. There can be anxiety, a link between anxiety, any emotion, anger, again, because we, even as adults, I mean, think about it. We sometimes don't know how to process our anger or what to do with our anger. So when a child is feeling angry, they have no idea. They're completely clueless. And sometimes we don't realize that they're angry until it's too late. And so talking to kids about anger, even if they are not having anger outbursts, but when they do become, around 2 or 3 is when a kid start, showing their anger. They show it and they don't really know what to do with it. And so you want to label it, and then you want to give them a tool. Usually breathing is what I recommend for kids. And actually I recommend it for adults as well, but it's a breathing, we're going to breathe in, we're going to breathe out. and we're going to feel a lot better. And it's okay to be angry. We don't want to say to a child, no, don't be angry. No, it's okay to be angry.
Right.
It's just not okay to express it in this way, you know?
Right. Right. Good. Oh, this is good. I'm watching the clock and we want to respect your time, Dr. Ospina, as well as everyone else. And so we're going to try to finish right here at 9. We might go a couple minutes over if you'll let us, just so we can lightning round you some more questions. But on the topic, I guess, like you said, of anger, what do we do if we lose it with our child? Like, is screaming effective? Because probably we've all accidentally done it some. So what would you say?
So it's a tiny bit effective in the moment because it really lets the child know that whatever is going on is meaningful, but it's
Right.
not an effective like long-term discipline strategy. And if we do lose
Right.
it, what we need to do as parents, if we do lose it, we put the child in a safe place and give some space between you and the child. Put the child in a safe place and walk away and regroup.
Yeah.
Take a minute. You've got to breathe. You've got to regroup. When you are calm, you come back. And the sooner the better, right? But if it takes hours, it's okay. If it takes a day, it's okay. At some point, you come back and you will, in an age appropriate way, explain to the child what happened. I just got really angry
Yeah.
and I lost my cool and I yelled and I didn't mean to yell
Yeah.
at you. It may have been scary for you. It may have been frightening. It may not have felt good for you. And I do apologize for that.
Yeah.
One of the ways, we don't then want to say, but you, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
We don't want to do that because that just takes away. Yeah.
That's
But
right.
what you can do is say, you can help me, right? I ask for your help in that if I ask you to do something, you please do it the first time.
Yeah.
Or, it's so you got to, I'm going to ask for your help so that we can try for this to not happen again and work together for this to not happen again.
Right.
That, you help me by doing this or following my directions or whatever. With little itty bitty kids, that's too much of an explanation. So it's really
Right.
going to be coming back and saying, I'm sorry that mommy yelled. I lost my temper and I
Yeah.
apologize. That's that.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just leave it at that with
That's
the
good.
younger kids.
Yeah. And our kids are so resilient. I have those moments with my kid, and please, mommy needs you to forgive me. Of course I forgive you, mommy. And they're like,
Totally.
on
They're
with it.
waiting for
But
that.
it's a good opportunity for us. Yeah.
Absolutely.
And I always think, mommy's gonna yell. If you try to run the street, I'm gonna yell.
Oh yeah.
Like, and one of the questions we received was, how do you what do you do if a child's putting something in their mouth and you just like you can't ignore it, you have to react fast. I think
Yeah.
correct, like, I mean, if I'm wrong, but
So
it's
I have to
appropriate in
say,
those
so
moments, right? A
that's
danger.
yeah, it brings me to a topic that's a little teeny bit controversial, and it's the topic of natural consequences. Okay, it's the
Okay. Yeah.
how many times do you tell a child, don't, candles, for example, candles at dinner time, like, don't touch a candle, you're going to burn yourself, don't touch a candle, you're going to burn yourself. At some point, maybe the child touches the candle and they burn themselves, and that's probably the last time they're going to touch the candle. I mean, no, we're
Right.
not going to let them run into the street, into traffic, but there are
Right.
times when we can allow for natural
Mhm.
consequences to do some of the
Right.
disciplining for us, or at
Yeah.
least to help us in the disciplining. But aside from that, yes, I mean, if it's like
That's
a
good.
truly dangerous situation, listen, you yell, you grab, you do whatever you need to do, and then you explain later.
Right. That's right. Okay, I have some more audience questions I want to go through quickly here. In the post-pandemic world, have you noticed an uptick in just defiant behaviors in school-age children? And how can we help our kids as they're regaining kind of like this, they're
Yeah,
experiencing a lot,
yeah, yeah. Expectations, I what I've noticed is an uptick in we all just need some time and space from each other. We've all been kind of confined to our
Mhm.
spaces, and so
Mhm.
I'm around my child probably a lot more than I would have been, and so if I'm not practicing the, for example, being mindful of catching them good, but I'm all the time, don't touch this, don't touch that, you know
Right. Right.
we've got to take a look and figure out, are we contributing to our child's anxiety, right? By just over picking, right? Over noticing all this stuff. If you're over noticing the good stuff, great, wonderful. But I'm a parent. I know that's not how it works all the time. So that might be one thing that is happening, you know, and they are gonna, the kids might be having a bit of a difficult time re-socializing. So getting back into play dates. So we may need to back up a little and kind of start from a few steps back with the no kicking, the no hitting, the no biting, stuff like that. And then in school,
Right.
maybe, you know, kind of have to get re-socialized to school, and so that the rules of sitting down, and of not just talking in the middle of anything or things like that. So is probably going to be a little bit of a one step back, but the refractory memory will be there, and they'll remember again if we stay consistent, patient, and realistic.
That's good. That's good. On those pillars, I'm gonna like write that on the fridge so I remember.
They're really
That's super
important.
helpful in the moment.
Yeah.
Super helpful. Okay, a couple more specific situations. So this viewer says that their child is having trouble following rules everywhere. They have to tell him many times to help him obey, and that he has some behavior problems. They feel like he's pushing them to the limits. They put him in timeout. He doesn't want to sit still there. They've never, physically engaged with him, it says, but at school, he's telling lies. They're saying that he's been hit or that he has two brothers, but he's in fact an only child. Like, they don't know what to do in this very trying situation. Do you have any advice that you would give them?
Yeah, and it is simple advice. Get some help. Get some help. It does sound like there's something going on beyond what is at face value there. And taking your child to a child psychologist for an evaluation and maybe a little bit of treatment can be very, very helpful. Don't try to do this all yourselves. If you're going through the list, and if you're listening to what we're talking about and you're saying, we've tried, we're doing this, we're doing our best, and it's not working, then get some professional help. There's nothing wrong with that. Please do it.
That's good. Yes, there's so many amazing resources out there, and I'm such an advocate for early intervention for anything. It's so helpful because you think, if I could have tools to give my child to help them succeed, like I want that, So I love that you spoke in that way of just, when do you start kind of thinking, should we have others look at this? I think that's great advice. Okay, another specific situation is, this listener has two boys 2 years apart, 4 and 6, and the competition is so exhausting. The older one thinks that they favor the younger one because he doesn't have to do as much, and his punishments are different because of his age. So how do you make them understand that?
Yeah, in that one, you would take the older child, and kind of like I talked about, when grandma doesn't want to follow the rules, you're going to take the child who's a little bit older and has a little bit more capacity to understand, and you are almost going to deputize them. You're going to say, you are one of us sometimes, right? And sometimes I'm going to need your help, in trying to get your brother to maybe eat his vegetables. So pick a thing that your older child is really good at, and you're going to say, you're so good at doing this one thing, and your brother's having a little bit of a difficult time with it. I would love your help. I would love your help in helping me teach your brother how you got so good at this, So you deputize very gently, right? Because if not, you're going to get because I say so, and no, you don't want that. But for very specific things that the older child is better at and has gotten a little better, that he can help his younger brother, that can be really helpful, because it makes him feel really included and part of the process. And when we feel part of the process, we buy into the process a little bit more.
That's right. That works with adults too,
Totally.
That's so good. And would you say, similarly, we had another question about the 5-year-old has been acting out purposely since bringing home the baby.
Yeah.
And so how do you react in a healthy way? Would you do the same strategies there?
Well, that's not unusual at all. We know that the older children regress because oftentimes, we're the baby just takes up so much air and so much attention, and so you want to deputize, but differently. You kind of want to explain to them, this is a baby, and the baby doesn't understand discipline like you understand discipline, and the baby doesn't understand rules like you understand rules, right? So you want to kind of, on some level, and you don't want to do this too long, but you kind of want to throw the baby under the bus to make the older kid feel like part of the reason they're not getting any attention is because they're not crying all the time. But you also then do need to up the amount of time that you spend reinforcing the positive behavior that the older child does, right? So that whole catching them being good and really praising them for all the little great things that they do, you want to do a little bit more of that while they adjust to the baby being at home.
That's good. That's good. What about, so this, I'm watching our time. I see we're 2 minutes over. Can you give us 2 more minutes?
Yes.
All right. We're going to do a couple more. There's parents like, no, please answer my question. Okay. So one question is, boys are 12 and 10, and the 12-year-old tries to parent the 10-year-old, and he's not having it. The 10-year-old's not having it. What's
No.
the best way to handle that? And older brother is genuinely trying to help.
Yeah, so they're too close in age. I mean, really, those are the same age group, basically. I mean, in a couple more years, there'll be a little bit more of a difference. And so you want to take the 12-year-old aside, and you want to tell them that you really appreciate their help, but that you've got this. You've got this.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah.
anything, I mean, we can allow them to maybe do one thing, which is maybe come and tell me if you see, if you see your brothers doing something that you think might hurt them. Or if you see your brothers doing something that you think might be dangerous, come tell me, and you can help them with that. But other than that, you don't have to worry about this. We've got this. The adults have this, and you just get to relax. Like, you just get to relax. So just let them know. Yeah, let them know that, you know what, everything's under control. He doesn't need to step in. Everything's going to be cool. You appreciate it, but everything's going to be fine. But you can give him that one give of, if you do see your brother doing something that is dangerous for him, definitely intervene. And so that allows them to kind of be on the lookout for those dangerous things.
That's good. Oh, that's so good to say, hey, I've got this. And to not, as a parent, you start to kind of pit the good one against the one who won't, and it's like, oh, that's, you don't want to go down that road.
No.
Yeah. So
but you're kids, we're parents, and we've got this.
That's right. That's great. Okay. What about a small child is having a tantrum, crying, yelling, and refuses to listen in that moment? Do you ignore it? What's your strategy?
Yeah, so depending on where it is, if they're at home, then yes, I would try the ignoring strategies until we get to the extinction burst. If we are, outside, if we're at the movie theater, if we are at, the supermarket, this may be one of those times, and we've got to decide kind of in the moment, we're going to grab and go. We're going to grab and go. Because removing young children from the stimulus, from the situation, is in fact a discipline strategy. So removing is a discipline strategy, So if you are at a grandma's house, you might want to, sustain and maintain and try to get to the extinction burst. But if you're out in public and this is really causing you a lot of distress, if it's causing you a lot of distress, remove the child from the situation, and that might mean that the whatever gets cut short, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's
all right.
Okay.
This is so good. I'm sorry. I'm just firing them at you. I'm trying to get through all of them. Okay. So final one. I'm sorry. I know some people are going to be like, oh, I didn't get my question. Okay. Do you break up fights between siblings, 4 to 7 age, or do you let them work it out?
Well, if they're physically fighting, then you physically separate them, and then you encourage them to work it out. Yes. We want to encourage and help by maybe asking open-ended questions, trying to get the communication going, and really not take sides. And so, but you do ultimately want to teach them that it behooves them to work it out, and then you might even want to offer like a collective reinforcer. If you guys can work this out, you each will get whatever, $2, or each of you will get some ice cream. So maybe you want to incentivize their working it out.
Yeah, that's good. Okay, I lied. One more. I'm going to try to wrap a couple questions in one. Good cop, bad cop. Obviously, if that's the case, maybe you're not on the same page. I don't know. And then another question would be, what kind of counseling or help do you suggest for parents who are not on the same page? Should they do family counseling, couples counseling, individual? Speak to that.
Probably like a couples counseling, but with the very clear goals of getting on the same page with discipline, and so it'll be probably a child therapist, not an adult therapist necessarily. So probably a child or family therapist who can who can help you guys get on the same page. And no, we really don't want to do good cop, bad cop too much. I mean, I know sometimes it helps, but we don't want to do good cop, bad cop if it's like, if the things are against, if it's like, I'm letting you do this and I know mom wouldn't let you do this. You don't want to do it that way. If you do good cop,
Right.
bad cop, it's more like mom came in and yelled, and maybe dad comes in and says, oh, listen, it sounds like mom lost her cool, but why don't you do this? So that was bad cop
Right.
did the yelling and good cop did the, the fixing. But
Yeah.
you don't want to do good cop, bad cop in opposite directions to undermine the other person.
That's good. I'm going to remember this image you gave too of that little wedge, how they just want to sneak in there and spread it out.
Yeah.
Um, so great. Dr. Ospina. Okay, last one little quick question. And this is more behavior modification. So let's generalize it because maybe someone else has a similar question. But, specific behavior, maybe the kid is waking up too many times at night, crying, calling out. You're trying to train them to
Yeah.
stay in their bed, to stay in their room. What strategies?
Yeah.
Little kid, three,
Right. So
four.
with the behavior modification strategies, you want to use those positive and negative consequences. So if it's a little itty bitty, you want to set up, that sticker chart, which leads to, this many stickers leads to the piece of candy tomorrow morning. And you've got to reinforce and be consistent. You're going to put the child back in their bed. You're going to put the child back in their bed and start soothing. First, you're going to soothe physically, then you're going to soothe verbally from the edge of the door, and then they're going to be able to self-soothe, because most of that sleep time stuff is about being able to self-soothe and knowing where you are, knowing that you're going to come if they really need you.
Yes. Oh, Dr. Espina, we could go all night long. We will not. This is clearly a hot topic for all of us, an
Yeah.
area that is we're all personally invested in, that we all need and want the support in. So if you're watching tonight, I hope you were encouraged. I hope you were equipped. Continue to seek out those resources, those help. Jackson Health has tons of resources. Again, the Behavioral Center, tons of resources. Miami Mom Collective, we would love to be a resource for you in any way to connect you. There are some links right here. You could screenshot this page of some things if you want to do a little extra research on your own. I do, again, like Dr. Ospina said, print out that developmental milestones sheet from Google and hang it on your on your fridge and let it encourage you. Because I know personally, sometimes I forget that my child may push my buttons like an adult can, but they are not emotionally mature as an adult to receive the treatment that I would treat an adult for the way they act sometimes, if that makes sense. So thank you so much from Uruguay. That's amazing. Thanks for listening tonight. But thank you for joining us, Dr. Espina. Thank you to the team at Jackson Health. Please mark your calendars. We're going to be back in 2 weeks. We're going to be talking about Halloween safety. So you don't want to miss it, because if you are taking your little people out, we want to talk about that. It's an exciting holiday, but also one of the most dangerous for children. So safety tips about how to make Halloween fun, but not frightful. So join us then. And again, if this resonated with you, or if you want to check out our archive of dozens of other webinars just like this one, jacksonevents.org, as well as watch your email in the next week, and we will send a link to the recording so you can watch it and share it with a grandparent or friend, or watch it again. So thank you again to Jackson for hosting us tonight. Dr. Ospina, thank you for going a little bit over with us so we could get some questions in there. We appreciate you. And to
Having me.
all of our listeners, thank you. Thank you so much. Everybody have a great weekend.